and kind of a mission goals are the providing education related, serving the broader paddling public by providing education related to all aspects of paddling, conservation, support to help protect paddling environments, and promoting programs and events to promote paddle sports exploration and recreation. Kind of our current board members, myself as president, Patrick Wellner. We got Kayla Risdale as the VP. Raise your hand, Kayla. Let's see. Yep. Dave Mays is the treasurer. Roger Foote is the secretary. Lee Sherling serves on the board. Gene Preston, John Giblin, Jane Cleland, Katie Albers, Bob Foley, and we've got Stephanie Horst joining for this next year. She's on the ballot that we'll pass out later to vote on. Is Stephanie here? Oh, there you go. Thank you. A quick kind of year in review for the club. We had a pool session, and there'll be a no more as we get through this, but did some Zoom presentations in the last spring. We had members participate in other organizations' cleanups. The paddling fair that we normally host was canceled due to flooding. We had members participate in the Kayak Around Compasca event that was put on up in Watertown. Members participate in Jake John, a race and paddle that Jared Beast organizes. We worked with Sanford on an adaptive paddling event, and then we had our President's Cruise in August. So I hosted a pool session up in Pier last March. Had a few people up in Pier come out, and we had kind of a picture there. Like had a member complete a first successful re-entry that day. And hopefully I reach out and work with the Y up in Pier and try to organize another one in the next couple months. We had Tom and Jacob Boyko talk about their Missouri River trip, Three Forks to St. Louis last April over Zoom. Actually, we might have did that in Google Meet, but same idea. And I think Tom is here. Is Jacob here too? Yep. I know we had members participate in the Yankton cleanup in Missouri River cleanup in May that the National Park Service and Friends of the Missouri National Recreational River organized. And we had people participate in the Lake Soap cleanup up in Pier that the Isaac Walton League organizes. Jared Beast, the last couple of years, has put on a small race in July, Yankton to Clay County Park, called the Jake John in memory of Jake Ryder, who passed away, I think it's been a couple of years now ago. I know we had some members, I think Dave and Mary helped with the adaptive paddling and at Corval Lake, Sanford Adaptive Sports, kind of the prime organizer on that. I know Roger Foote helps out with the Kayak Around Compasca. Who organizes that in
Watertown
Rotary Club? Yep. Then we helped out, some folks in Pier helped out with the Swim Across Oahe event as safety boats in August. And I organized a President's Cruise last year in August. We went from Martin Grove to Clay County. Had a pretty good turnout there. 14 paddlers, 13 boats, and 1 dog. Jared and Laura's dog rode along with them, Maggie. And just kind of a little thanks, just got some door prizes for the end of the meeting from Runnings and Night Brigades. And in the past, Shields donated a pretty sizable amount to us. Dave Norman's donated money to the club over the years. Roger, through his Twisted Canoe Boat Shop, donates prizes. We kind of started giving out awards to members that we felt were deserving. And we kind of have them named after late members of the club that are no longer with us. Kind of started 2 of them. So Dick Davidson founded the South Dakota Canoe Association in 1981. Published the association newsletter and was president for many years. And we kind of honored Dick with what we call the Trailblazer Award, recognizing members who take SDCKA and themselves to the next level, blazing a new trail. Dick always pushed the limits and was fearless when it came to paddling. And then we also, in the past, have done the Jay Heath Explorer Award, and Jay joined the association in the early days, and upon his retirement set out to explore local waterways and promote paddling in our community. By the time kayaks were popular, and when Jay began, he had a full boat, which was a folding boat that he could carry in the trunk of his car and assemble. It was kind of like tent poles and a fabric that stretched out over it. And the Explorer Award that we named for him recognizes a member who has been passionate about the paddling community and never stops exploring. Jay's passion to seek out new waterways and journal about them and encouraging others to visit was the intention behind this award. Let's try this button again. All right, and I kind of got some past award winners here, but I'm not seeing my notes. And now I did break it. Jesus. All right, so this year we didn't have any nominees for the Jay Heath Explorer Award, but we do have an award winner for the Dick Davidson Trailblazer Award. And so the individual we're giving the award to this year has been a great steward for the paddling community, not just in South Dakota, but in the whole Midwest. This individual is an active paddler in multiple disciplines, whitewater touring and racing. He's paddled the Missouri River from Montana down to the Gulf, and has been active in supporting through paddlers through the Missouri River Paddlers Facebook page. He's made several significant donations to SDCKA and other regional paddling organizations. He leads the Iowa Whitewater Coalition in protecting, supporting, and improving whitewater areas and water trails by reconnecting the rivers throughout Iowa. I present you the 2024 Dick Davidson Trailblazer Award winner, Dave Hellman.
Now I understand the email you sent me. Are you coming for certain? Yes.
Here, guys. Congratulations, Dave.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, you guys don't realize that we have Iowa and South Dakota have a very long history. I took over the Iowa Canoe Association back in the early 80s. And Dick got a hold of me and said, let's trade newsletters. I never got to meet him.
Really?
But we were trading newsletters all through the 80s with all the races and stuff. So I've known about the club up here for years and wanted to lose the support. You guys do great stuff up here. You really push the community. So thank you so much.
Well, good morning or afternoon. My name is Roger Foote. I've been with the South Dakota Canoe and Kayak Association for a long time now. I forget how many years. During the summers each year I try to host a river run somewhere in the 39-mile region of the Missouri River. Well, I guide some paddlers along down through there, and this happens to be one of the pictures at Montfort during rather low water levels. But we do get a lot of questions about how can we tell what the water levels are, what is a river gauge, how do they work. I use these 4 websites, not exclusively, but a lot. If you guys want to take pictures of this screen and refer to these websites later, there's more ways to access this same information, but these are the 4 that I use. So what is a river gauge? In South Dakota and all across the country, there is a network of gauges on most, I'd say almost all major water bodies and a lot of tributaries throughout the country. And this is how we track the height of the water, how fast the water is going, the temperature of the water. Some gauges will take water quality data. Some gauges only activate under flooding conditions. This is the first. Why is this not working right, Pat? This is down here as well. Okay. I know Pat's not a teenager, but he helps me out. This is the water at NOAA.gov. It's on there. Each one of those dots represents a gauging station throughout the system. And I was going to tell you what a river gauge is. At each point, you've got to measure from something. So the Corps of Engineers, the state, NOAA, whoever, has put in basically a yardstick, and that's way oversimplifying. A yardstick where they measure the water level on a day-to-day basis, sometimes an hourly basis, but that yardstick isn't necessarily tied to any other elevation but itself. So when someone says that the gauge is at 2.3, it's 2.3 feet from the bottom of where that gauge is set. It may have a datum that ties into a real elevation that correlates to the rest of the world, but most of the time when you hear of a reading, a gauge reading, it's just an arbitrary number upon that stick at that location. And they can vary wildly from north of Watertown down. Each one is on a separate gauge height. So if you see 7.2 in Watertown, that's a lot different from the 23.6 out of Lake Compesca. Does that kind of make sense? Or am I just confusing everybody even more? These things will also measure water flow, and that's done in cubic feet per second. On the Missouri, it's in the thousands of cubic feet per second. Up in the upper Big Sioux River area, it's just in hundreds of feet per second. It depends on where you are. And then, but please keep in mind, 32,000 cubic feet per second on the Missouri River, where it's a half a mile wide, is really a lot slower than that same cubic feet per second coming out of a dam on a chute. So the amount of water flows, it's how fast it's passing a certain point. And the narrower it is, the faster it runs. Hopefully that helped you. So these are the points in South Dakota. If you were to click on one of those dots, Alright, so if you were to click on one of those green dots, this will pop up, or something similar, as to one of the gauges that you selected. This one is on the 39-mile stretch of the Missouri River near Greenwood. When I'm hosting river runs along that area, I take a look at this, and you can tell from the marks on the graph that the water levels are rising and falling, rising and falling. This is due to dam operations and the amount of electricity that they're generating throughout a 24-hour period. I've got a little more explanation on that as we go on, but if you look on the right-hand side, it shows the flow in thousands of cubic feet per second. On the left-hand side is the stage, or the gauge height. This one starts out around 24 feet, and then the average goes up to the highest point at 25.9, and then you can see the chart as it drops back down again. The Corps controls the dams, of course, not only for flood control but electricity generation. They don't need to generate as much at night as they do during the day, so you'll get fluctuations in the channel. What that relates to as a paddler is that when you start out in the morning, the water may be 2 feet lower than when you quit that afternoon or evening. This is important as to where you park your pickup. Yeah. Don't ask me how I know that. So this is, and as you use this system and you paddle a certain area that you're familiar with, you'll be able to kind of judge, okay, the river levels are running at 25 or say 32,000 cubic feet per second. You'll know that at 22 cubic feet per second, there's a lot of sandbars, lots of dirt exposed, the banks are tough to get down to. As it comes up to the 36 level, a lot of the sandbars disappear, there's not going to be as many places to pull off, and everybody's going to want to pull off for lunch sooner or later, so you may be in a bunch of Phragmites. But that's why I use this particular gauge for those trips. Now the Big Sioux River Information System, or Flood Information System, the state started this, I want to say in 2011 they started putting this together, and it's based off the Iowa model. But as the flooding in the Big Sioux, they started this to give you more information on what's going on. These are all the monitoring points from north of Watertown all the way down to Sioux City. And as water levels change and heights change and flood information comes in, those will change colors from blue to red, yellow, green as the danger levels or just current conditions of those locations. If you were to click on one of those, and this is Split Rock Creek, I did this yesterday, so this is fairly current. You can see from the outlet or the pop-out boxes, no flood alerts. It gives you a gauge height or stage height around 3 feet, and from looking on Facebook on our webpage, some people have discussed that the best water levels to paddle Split Rock is between 2.5 to 3.5 feet. So right now would be great, but it'd be a little chilly to do that. It also shows all the watershed that drains down to that point. You can see the shaded area. And this works for every single gauge site up through the Big Sioux system. If you're curious about just one little area, you can zoom into that, click on the nearest gauge. It shows you the area, the water, the land area, population, and the stage height and last reported date. Corps of Engineers, they have a whole extensive website and system based around the dams on the main stem of the Missouri River. I couldn't get the entire page in a slide. It goes down about 3 more sections. But the one I really wanted to talk about, or one that I did want to talk about, was the project orders. Pop back and forth. But you can see some of the information that you can pull, not only from our area, but all the way down the system. Under project orders, this is for Which dam? No, the one at Pickstown. What's Fort Randall Dam, yesterday. This is their daily release schedule, discharge in cubic feet per second. So they're running 12,000, 11,000, 10,000 as time goes on. So they'll be ramping down the river flow over the next 3 days. So if you're doing a multi-day trip on the Missouri River, it's kind of nice to keep this in the back of your mind. Water levels are going to decrease over the next 3 days. This also works during crazy spring runoff season. They may back their discharge down because of the floodwaters that are coming through as well. And then if you go to waterdata.usgs.gov, they've just revamped their website. It didn't look like this before. But there again, this is the same type of information that you can collect and read off of the different gauging stations throughout South Dakota. And you can pick whichever state that you're interested in. It works all across the country. You can select discharge, gauge height, depth of water level, temperature, or any data, and it'll show all the sites that are available. If you click on, it's the same type of data that you'll get here based on the choices that you select. So now that I've confused everybody, did anyone have any questions? Did that make any sense at all? Did it help? A guy works with it for 20 years and then you forget that not everybody's heard it day in and day out for that long. This picture is the same location the next day from that location, just looking to the right, and you can see the different water levels. I killed it. You can see the different water levels in just a 12-hour period. That's how the dams are releasing the water as you go through.
I have a question.
Yes?
So if they're all at different levels and you've never looked at it before, how do you know if?
The absolute best thing to do is to get on the Facebook page and say, hey, has anybody been down the river recently? What are the conditions like? Numbers are great, experience is even better. That's the best advice that I can give you. I like between 25 and 30,000 CFS on the river in that section, but then that might be lower water levels further down you go when you get into the half-mile wide reaches of the Missouri River. So the best thing to do is ask questions, and don't be afraid to go out there a day early or a half a day early and take a look at the water and see if you want to be out there or not. There's been days where we've said, nah, we're not doing this. And then other days it's like, great, it's awesome, let's go. Any other questions? Yes.
Roger, one thing I'd add too, is great presentation. Keep a river log. Like you said, the gauge isn't relative to typically anything. It's telling you what's going on there. And so if you've taken a trip and you know at 6 feet, I didn't really want to be out there, but 4 feet I had blast. And I've got 40 years of river logs, everything's in a spreadsheet. You could go back and look and see, and the only time it gets to be a problem is when they discontinue a gauge, if you get to start over. But yeah,
Right.
If your friends have logged their times and they know their levels, it's unbelievably useful data to have that experience.
Absolutely. I did a river report after our first river run. I did a report for the people who were doing the Fort to Field 50. I'd gone through the week before the race, put a report on Facebook. You think I would have put the numbers on there? I went back and I found that on the website. It's like, what the heck? I looked at them, I did that, but I neglected to put that in the report on the page. So next time I do that, somebody asks me where the hell the numbers at. Any other questions, comments? Anyone want to add anything?
I got a comment. We do the same thing on Split Rock Creek, and we want a whitewater on Split Rock Creek, which is up by Garrettson.
Mm-hmm.
And we did the same thing, we just recorded ourselves so we knew when it was good and when it was bad.
Okay,
So you go to this site, you know, like say they had a big rain or something in Minnesota, and you go, oh, it's at such and such, well, it's not gonna be any good today, it's running too low.
mm-hmm,
And you might go another day, well, it's running 1,000 feet per minute, that means it's at flood stage.
mm-hmm,
You know, it's high, and you look at the gauge depth too, so now we know when it's around 700 cubic feet per minute, it's like, oh, we gotta go. Because on Split Rock Creek, that only happens maybe once or twice a year, maybe not even in a year.
sure,
So that's it, that's exactly what you do, just like you were talking about. You find out where it's good relative to that creek with that information.
some people have commented on that on the websites. I went to the South Dakota Canoe and Kayak page, I searched the page for Split Rock, and I did find a conversation where someone was talking about that 2.5 to 3.5 feet on that gauge. So that, but more of that information to share with everyone would be very helpful as well.
Yeah, maybe I should share.
My experience from Watertown North, Summit got an 11-inch rain one day, and it took 3 days for the water to get from Summit down to Watertown.
Yeah.
But me and a couple farmers, of course, we gotta go look at this wall of water coming out and taking out fences each mile.
Oh, yeah.
And that was pretty impressive, 11 inches in like 2 hours or 3 hours, something like that. That's a lot of water. Anything else? As long as I'm up here, and I've been thinking about summer, I do have one trip planned for June. And that is March, May, June. June 13th, 14th, and 15th. I will be taking paddlers, we'll be camping at Monfort, in the upper 39. We'll be taking about 10 miles upstream to the Harry's. We'll paddle down to Monfort, we'll camp there tonight, and then that Sunday morning we'll paddle from there down to Running Water. If anyone would like to tag along, whether you want to be a paying customer or just want to be in the group, be more than happy to have you. Let me know, and I'll be around all throughout the meeting if you want a phone number or anything. Eventually, I'd like to do mini rendezvous once a summer up there, just for anybody who wants to come. And with that, that's all I have for you guys today. We'll see you on the water.
My name is Roger, and I'm an introvert. And in my previous life, I used to be a soil scientist. Where's Gene Preston? Yeah, he's out there. And in an unscientific poll I took one time, I found out that 92.7% of all soil scientists are introverts. And the way you tell an introverted soil scientist from an extroverted is that when an introverted soil scientist talks to you, he looks at his shoes. When an extroverted soil scientist talks to you, he looks at your shoes. But even introverts like to get up and speak once in a while. So this trip began, I had a friend that hitchhiked out to Seattle and back. And one of the trips he caught was with a TV cameraman who told him about taking a trip on filming and canoeing on the McKenzie River and the Yukon River the previous summer. And he came back, he told us that story. We thought, that's a great trip. That's something, you know, yeah, that's fantastic, but that's usually all the farther it went. And we told other people about it also, but we didn't really plan on doing it. Until one day, another friend of ours came over and he said, let's do it. Let's canoe the McKenzie River. So we started thinking about it, and I can't remember the speaker last year, the one that canoed the Mississippi River in record time. One of his statements that I always liked was he said, I could do it because I was independently broke. And that was me too. I was independently broke. I was 21. I had been trying to go back to school, which wasn't working out too good, and so I had no commitments. I had nothing no job or anything like that. I thought, yeah, let's do this. 1972, this is pre-internet days. We didn't have access to even a computer to go out and start looking up information. So let's see here, space button. Which one do I hit here? That one, okay, yeah. This is how we found our information. Card catalogs. How many people remember card catalogs? Good. And so card catalogs, making phone calls, doing everything that we could to find out what this trip would involve. And we didn't, well, let's see. Well, let me keep going on here about this. So we started making our plans. We had 2 canoes. We had a tent. We started planning out what we would do for food. Our food pretty much consisted of oatmeal, cream of wheat, instant mashed potatoes, instant rice, dried soups. That's we had no freeze-dried foods or anything else like that. What else we need? We had sleeping bags, but this was before we knew about such things as just a foam pad. There were no air mattresses or anything else like that. We did not have a cook stove. All we did, we cooked all of our meals over an open fire with using a grill. We were minimalists before minimalism became a movement, and we just thought this is what we need to do. Okay, well, one other thing I do remember is about a week before we took off on the trip, I went home, ate a lot of my mother's cooking so I could gain some weight, because I knew every time the previous canoe trips I'd been on, I was always hungry, so I wasn't going to be. I think I started out weighing 181 pounds, and further on the trip, halfway through the trip, I found a scale at a town that we were staying at for a little bit, and I weighed 178, so I lost a whole 3 pounds along the way. But here's the McKenzie River. It starts out at the Great Slavey Lake, and it goes about, I think it's about 1,300 or 1,400 miles until it finally reaches the Bering Sea, part of the Arctic Ocean up there. How far is it to get up there to go canoeing? Well, our starting point became Fort Simpson, and that is, as in 1972, that's where the road ended. And so that's how far we were going to go. From Brookings to Fort Simpson, I think it says 2,033 miles. And we pretty much drove straight through with a few stops along the way, but not much. We didn't camp out any night, we just kept driving. There were 4 of us in a car, all loaded down, and that's how we got there. We did stop at Edmonton to buy some maps that we needed, and the last 400 miles from high-level Alberta to Fort Simpson were gravel. And again, some of that had just been opened up the year before. There were no gas stations along the way. We saw some black bears run across the road, but we didn't see very many people. Here's the road to Fort Simpson. This would have been after rain, very washboardy, and we did have some of that. 60th parallel. This is where the Northwest Territories of Canada started. And so there's a little setup there to tell you that you've reached the border of the Northwest Territories. And I think 2 of the guys were still sleeping in the car. Another guy got out, got this picture taken. And the photos that you see here, by the way, were taken with a SLR camera, but in the old days, this was not automatic. You had to have a handheld meter, light meter to it. You set your f-stop, your shutter speed were all manual, and you focused in manually. So some of my slides are not that great, but some of them were pretty good. But this was reaching the Northwest Territories. Just another map of the area. You can see the outline of the drainage area that supports the McKenzie River. And some of the talk about cubic feet per second. I wished I would have gathered some more information on that, but sometimes I don't know how many cubic feet per second that at the discharge point up at the Bering Sea was, but I think it's 100, 200,000 cubic feet per second in some cases. But there's some of the towns listed along the way, and we tried to stop in those all we could. Okay, I guess another stretch of road. This is a slide I pulled off of the internet, much better. To get to Fort Simpson, we had to cross the river on a ferry. And that trip, on the way up there on the road, I gotta take a look at my notes here once in a while to remind myself what I'm talking about, is that when we were about 50 miles from Fort Simpson, we were about out of gas, and we hadn't seen anybody. Again, maybe a black bear or 2 had run across the road. There were no gas stations. We didn't know we were gonna be able to make it to Fort Simpson without getting some gas from somewhere. We came around a bend and there were some workmen on the road that had a big tank of gas in the back of their pickup. And they filled us up that we had enough gas to get to Fort Simpson. We got to Fort Simpson, and that is the ferry that we had to take across, and it turned out that we saw it going across, we thought we missed it. Well, it came back one more time, and we got across, and then we found out that the ferry was about falling apart, and the captain was gonna quit the next day, so we caught the last ride across, right? We lucked out with the gas, we lucked out with getting across, and we had, things like that happening. Here's a view of the McKenzie River from Fort Simpson, and what I wanted you to see here is how wide it is, how high the riverbanks were. Because we started talking to some of the people there, and they said, oh yeah, this spring we just about got flooded out here. There was a big ice dam that built up on the river and just about flooded us out. And you look across the river and you look how far down it was, and you thought, man, that had to have been one hell of a dam. And there is a picture, this again I pulled off the internet later on, that is Fort Simpson, and that apparently there was an ice dam at that point in time too, because you can see how close the town is to getting flooded out. Okay. We left Brookings on June 12th, and we were on the river June 15th. And what's wrong with this picture? We're not wearing our PDFs. I heard, and I've learned the last couple of times here the importance of doing that, but we didn't have, what we had were the old orange vests for our life jacket, if you remember those. And instead of wearing them, we tie a rope to it and tie a rope to our belt. And figured if we went over, we could pull them to ourselves. And I've learned that that's not a good thing. You don't do it. The other thing you don't see here is we're not wearing sunscreen. And we're up, eventually got up to 24 hours of sunlight. We thought this is a hell of a way to get a good tan. Now, 50 years later, I'm paying the price. I go to see a dermatologist every 6 months. But anyhow, that's the time, that was the thing to do. That's some ice along the shoreline, and we ran across that well into July, and we ran across some blocks of ice that were 10 feet high. I've got in my notes, I kept my own personal log, and I needed to go back this to remind me of some of the things that we did and what happened along the way. But I've got a note in there saying in July that there was some 10-foot high blocks of ice that we ran across and stuff. So just another shot that is called Mount Gade, and it was a pretty prominent thing. One of the few things that I regret about the trip is that we didn't stop and climb that. We did some exploring, but not as much as we could have, and I kind of wish we'd have climbed that. Okay, another shot. You probably can't see it, but way off in the distance there is a canoe with a couple of people in there. And that's, again, another typical day of canoeing there. Along with our food, when we plan for our food and you buy it and it'd say this is 2 servings, well, we double that or triple it or even quadruple that because we knew we were going to be eating a lot. The only time we ever overdosed on food was our first day out, and we made 24 servings of oatmeal. I think we ate about 20. To this day, I didn't even know if cream of wheat still exists, but I've never had cream of wheat since that trip. Well, another supplement that we had is that we had peanut butter and jelly, and we forgot to buy bread at Port Simpson, and Wrigley was the first town that we were going to be able to hit. We get some bread. Well, Wrigley had been flooded out previously, and so they moved the town across the river, and so all we did was find these abandoned buildings here. So no bread to be had for our peanut butter and jelly. Our maps were from 1957, so between 57 and 72, Wrigley had been flooded out. I guess, yeah, some more ice along the way, and this was in July. Just another shot on the river, and this was, you know, everyday occurrence pretty much. Okay, another typical day on the McKenzie River. The McKenzie River is on the average mile and a half wide, 2 miles wide in some places. One place called the Ramparts, it narrowed down to about a half a mile, and the current did pick up. But on a place like this, the average current was probably 5 or 6 miles an hour. And for the most part, we had good canoeing, the weather was good, but there were times that we did get into a little bit of trouble. I used to live in Pierre, and there was I think it was a National Missouri River Conference being held in Pierre. They moved those around, I think, from city to city. And I went to one of them, and there was a talk by a guy that was wanting to create a national river trip, you know, the Pacific Coast Trail, the Appalachian Trail. He wanted to turn that into the Missouri River. And he gave a talk, and he'd canoed the Missouri River from top to bottom several times, and he said, "Where's the most dangerous part on this trip?" And the answer was, on Lake Oahe, if you're out in the middle of it and the wind comes up, so you're in big trouble. Well, this river was like Lake Oahe, except it moved. It had a 5 or 6 mile an hour current. And one time we were out in the center of it, and the wind came up, and we were dealing with waves that were 3 feet high, 4 feet high, I think. And I was in the canoe with I was one of the least experienced canoers on this trip, and I was with the other guy who had even less experience than I did. And so we were battling to try to get back to shore, and we finally did, and I'd never felt so happy to feel the ground beneath my feet on that day. And we were much more careful after that. I'm not sure if this was a Boston whaler. I called it a Boston whaler. Boston whaler, is anybody familiar with what that is? They're a very fast boat. It's a boat that drug smugglers would use, that type of thing. And we did see several of those going up and down the river. There was a lot of barge travel on the river. And there were some other canoeists and kayakers too. Typical campsite, shoreline campsite. You can see our tent off there, rocky shoreline. Couple of stories here. Well, we actually spent the group, the 4 of us, 6 weeks together. 4 weeks were on the river. 4 of us sleeping in a 4-man tent. And Vern Olson knows my complaints about 4-man tents.
He hates them.
They're good for 2 people. That's it. There were 4 of us in there. And once in a while, somebody would have a strange dream. One time, I woke up and the guy I was sleeping next to was embracing my sleeping bag and about to kiss it. And I woke him up and I said, "Farminky, what the hell's going on?" And he goes, "Well, he dreamed that he was at a wedding of his ex-girlfriend and he was about to kiss her. Congratulations." Another time, a different guy sat up and he goes, 1, 2, 3. He says, "Somebody's missing." And we said, "No." You know, his eyes were open, but he was asleep. And we said, "No, we're all here." And he goes, "No, 1, 2, 3, somebody's missing." And then there was some sound outside. He goes, "What's that?" And somebody said, "Oh, that's the 4th guy." And he says, "Okay." And he laid back down. And when we landed and set up camp like this, we all had kind of duties that we just kind of fell into. Mine was to set up the fire pit, gather the firewood. Other people set up the tent and stuff like that. We took turns doing dishes, but we all had kind of duties that worked out pretty good. I was saying, if you want to get to know somebody, spend 4 weeks on a river with them and you'll get to know them very well. And at the end of this trip, we were still all friends, so that was a good thing. Let's see here. I guess, one other story about the river too. Not every day was a good day for everybody. And I'm thinking of a day that, particularly that I had, where it was a cold, wet, rainy, windy day, and I was tired. I was just exhausted, and I kept saying, "Let's stop and camp here." And another guy said, "No, let's keep going." So we put it up to a vote, and I won 3-1, except there weren't any good campsites along the way, and so we kept going. And then we voted again, and it was 2-2. And then I really became irritated. I wouldn't paddle as hard. I kept whining and complaining about everything, but we finally kept going. The sun finally came out. We found a nice campsite. We put the tent up. Before I did anything, I rolled my sleeping bag out, and I was asleep the moment I hit that sleeping bag. And I had a watch with me. I'm the only one that carried a watch, so I don't know why. Because, you know, we had this joke was, do you have daylight savings time? And the answer was yes, we save it 24 hours a day. But it was 6 o'clock when I laid down, and then I woke up at 12, and I felt very refreshed and ready to go. And I said, hey, I feel great, 6 hours of sleep, and I'm ready to go. And they go, no, you didn't sleep 6 hours, you slept 18 hours nonstop. I said it had rained between that time, they'd gone fishing and stuff too. And so I was tired then, and I think they finally realized that. We'd see float planes every now and then. Got buzzed by this one, they'd come by and they'd wave at us even. And one campsite that we set up, along shore there was this big 50-gallon drum that we thought probably fell off a barge and just got washed ashore. And we set our camp up to it pretty close, had the campfire going, walked over and looked at it, and it was actually a 50-gallon drum full of airplane fuel. And these bush pilots would have stashes like that all around the area. So when they ran low on fuel, they knew where they could get some more. We moved our fire. We moved it away. Ran across a fish drying camp, and so we, stopped in just to visit with the people there. And there was an older couple, and they said, where are you going? We told them we're going to Inuvik, and they said, well, can you deliver some messages for us? I said, the government was supposed to send us a new fishing net. We haven't got that. We're out of bug dope. We had some old mosquito coils that didn't really work very good in the tent anyhow, and so we gave them those. And then they gave us a bag of dried fish and said, can you take this to the radio station and have them call out, give this names to the people who can come up and collect their fish or whatever. So we became a delivery system for them also. And so, but that was kind of interesting. Okay, another shot. Mountains were always in the background. We saw mountains all the time. But just another shot, floating along, no PDFs. This was called the Ramparts, and this was kind of an interesting spot too. These were limestone cliffs, some of them up to 250 feet tall, and the river narrowed to about half a mile at this point, and so the current really picked up in this area. This was a shot that I took off the internet again, and it's pretty close to what that first shot was like and stuff too. So. Right across a lot of abandoned cabins. I think this one was actually a former town called Little Chicago, and we're goofing off, we're acting like we're lost, and we probably were, but we were on the river and only had one way to go. So. More mountains, more river. Rock bedding. Now it's kind of hard to see, but off a ways you can maybe kind of see somebody there, and what they're doing is they found what we did for entertainment. You can see all the rocks along the shores, and we'd find a small log or a big stick, whatever you want to call it, and sometimes they were carved out by beavers, and we would bat rocks out into the river and then place bets to see who could bat a rock out the farthest and stuff. But yes, we were easily entertained. Another typical campsite. There were a lot of good campsites like this that we stayed at. Next slide, you have to use your imagination. I say mosquitoes because for the most part, if we found an open area, the sun was out, there was a little breeze, the mosquitoes were not that bad. If you stepped back into the bush, you were about carried away by the mosquitoes. My record slapping somebody else on the back to see how mosquitoes I could kill. I killed 108 with one slash. But, so we did not go into the bush too often, but in the areas where they were kind of bad at the camp, what we would do is, I'll get ready, get into the tent as fast as you could, zip it up, and then spend the next 5 or 10 minutes killing all the mosquitoes that you could that got in with us. And sometimes you'd still find some the next morning with a lot of blood in them. Okay, once we got off the main river, it turned into the delta, and the delta was a very big area, and we were warned, be very careful when you're in the delta. A lot of people get lost there. And so we were pretty careful about following the channel that we're in, but here's where we're getting into the delta. That's me, and I say saved from the quicksand. I was usually the first one that would get out of the canoe and then land the canoe, so we didn't run them up shore and else like that. Well, in the delta, the water slows down, and what happened is you get a lot of silt deposit in some of these areas, and I jumped out of the canoe and I just kept sinking and sinking and sinking, and I could hold on to the canoe, but I finally got out, and that's what it was. I just some very deep silt there, and I just got caught in it. Here's the town of Inuvik. This is where we ended up. And you can see the channel that kind of goes alongside it, and we pulled into kind of a landing area there. One of the very first things I saw when we got out of there was this big conveyor belt made in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so here we were, and now we're at the end of the trail, so to speak. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the RCMP. On the way there, we would stop at all the different little communities that were along the way. And I'm gonna have to backtrack and tell a story about one of those too. But we check in with the RCMP, and if we didn't show up someplace, they'd probably go out looking for us. But they were very good people. And when we got into Inuvik and we checked in with them and said, this is it. And we went to a bar, and the nickname of this bar was called the Zoo Bar, because the chair could stay empty for a whole long time, and then two people might want it at the same time, and all of a sudden a fight would break out. Pretty soon the whole bar turned into a fight. So we're having a beer there, and this guy comes over and he asks if he can join us, and he looked familiar, and then we finally figured out it was the RCMP person that we had checked in when we first got to Inuvik out of uniform. And he was telling us a little bit about how the RCMP had to operate in this type of territory. The story he told was that he had to go in this bar and arrest somebody one time, and he went in, and the guy was sitting with 3 other guys, and the guy said, I'm not going with you. And he knew he was outnumbered, so he started walking away. He said he started getting out the door, and somebody else stopped him and said, Constable, what's the problem? And he said, well, the guy's supposed to go with me, he doesn't want to. And they said, well, you go back and ask him again. And so he did, and when he did, he had about 5 or 6 guys backing him up. And so the guy got up and quietly left with him. And so the RCMP said, we have to cooperate with the people. If we don't, they don't cooperate with us. And so they were, very, very good about knowing people. The other story that the last town that we hit before we got to a new river, and the name has changed in that. They've given it a different name, but at the time it was called Arctic Red River. And we're talking to some people there, and they said, well, Arctic Red River got its name because there was this big battle between the Inuits, the Eskimos, and the native population there, the Indians. An Eskimo Indian fight is the way they put it. And it was so bad that the river flowed red with blood. And I thought, okay, and you could see somewhat of an enmity, a tension between these two different groups of people. And I thought, the battle took place here, but you think they'd get over it. And then it turns out the battle was in 1942. So it was 30 years hence. There were still some pretty recent memories. I actually went on the internet to see if that story was true, and I couldn't find anything that confirmed it. It was a good story, but the river is called Arctic Red River because there was a lot of iron in the water there, and it turned it red. The big bonus that we got on this trip was at Inuvik, about the time we showed up, was something called the Northern Games, and it was like an Inuit Olympics. And this were different feats that the people would do. to show their endurance, their strength, their ability to put up with pain. And they said all the things that you needed to be able to survive up there. This was called a high kick, and you can see in the center there's a guy that's kind of jumped up. And what high kick was that they would dangle a piece of fur down, and then you would go up to it, you'd kick it with one foot, and then you would land on the foot that you kicked it with. And they were kicking over 6 feet in the air. And in fact, the announcer said, does anybody out in the audience have a tape measure so we could see how high the boys are going? And that's the type of competition. They were all very encouraging, and it wasn't a bloodthirsty competition. But this was not at a Nubik that we saw, but this is high kick. That's kind of how it was done. This is called over the rope, and you can see a guy trying to twirl around that rope, and the rope wasn't really taut. It had some slack in it, and you get up there and you have a certain amount of time to try and go over that rope as many times as you could. And you can kind of see the guy working his way over there too. To me, I thought, that can't be that hard. And I was coming back from a party one evening, and I was walking by that, and there was nobody else around, so I tried it. I don't think I got around it once. And then there was somebody outside there sitting in a stand and started clapping when he saw me, so. Tug of war. They had a tug of war between the East and the West Inuits. These people came all the way from Alaska, Labrador to Alaska, and then they had a tug of war between the married women and the single women, and that type of thing. Tea-boiling, bannock, bread making. This contest, they had a pile of wood about 20 yards away from where they're working here. This was for women. They had to run over, get wood, run back, start a fire, boil tea, and make bannock. And the bannock is kind of like fried bread and stuff. So that was, and I think they were doing that 15, 20 minutes. They were being able to do that. This one, I don't know what it was called. It's a weight hanging from an ear. And if you can see, the guy has a weight hanging from his ear. If you can make that out, kind of a bad slide. I don't know how much it weighed, 10, 15 pounds, something like that, but the object was to hang the weight from your ear and then walk along circles inside this gym for as long as you could. And this was only pure pain as far as I'm concerned. I didn't see any strength or condition that would help you survive. It's just a way that you could show how much pain you could get. The food, muktuk. Muktuk is whale blubber. I got to taste whale blubber. I got to taste dried caribou, other dried fish and stuff too. This was part of the whole thing. And for me, I went up to the stand to buy some muktuk, and there's something else called mukluk, and that's your boots. And I ordered some mukluk, and they kind of looked at me and started laughing a little bit. But muktuk, it's whale blubber with whale skin. The skin was chewy. The blubber tasted like blubber. Now we're up in Nubik. We have no way out. Part of our planning for that part of the trip was a little bit slack. We heard stories. One of them was that you could stow away on a barge, but you had to be careful that the captain didn't see you, or you'd make sure to turn around and off you would go. So you had to bribe a worker and try and get on a barge. The other way, which you could have flown out commercially, there was a big airline. They had a big airport there. This was an oil company town, and they had a big airport, so commercial flights came in, and it cost about $200 to fly out, and we probably had that much among the four of us, so that was not too much of an option. The other option was to hitchhike out on an oil company plane, and we talked to a guy that had done that. He told us about another guy he knew that spent one summer just hitchhiking around the whole Arctic on oil company planes. They were essentially the truckers up north. If you ever hitchhiked, trucker liked you, you never wanted for a ride because you get on the radio and you could always get a ride. Anyhow, the airport was a few miles away from Inuvik. We caught a ride out there. We were hanging out. We were able to ship our canoes and some of our other equipment out on planes for 12 cents a pound. And I wish we could have shipped ourselves out for 12 cents a pound, but we couldn't do that. So we hang out at the airport. We finally met a pilot that said he would take us out. And this is part of the flight. You can see the McKenzie River down below. Now he flew us down to Edmonton, and that is a Hawker Siddeley turboprop. I've always remembered the name of that type of plane. And there we are in Edmonton, and we got to see total darkness for the first time in about 5 weeks or so. But the adventure's not over. Our car is still 800-900 miles north in Fort Simpson. And so 2 of us started hitchhiking. I don't know how much time I've got here.
We're ahead schedule.
Okay. 2 of us started hitchhiking back to get our car, and our canoes and equipment were supposed to be shipped to Hay River, which was not too far from Fort Simpson. Me and the other guy, for a while, we caught rides together, but finally we get, trucker might say, well, I take one of you, but not both of you. And so we were kind of split up, and we ran across each other, and it was decided that I would stay at Hay River and the other guy would go up and get the car. And I caught a ride with the trucker, and he was kind of an introvert too. We didn't talk a whole lot, but he started shaking his wristwatch one time, and his watch had stopped. And I think something else went wrong, and then he said, at least the nice thing about driving on gravel, you can only drive 50 miles an hour and you never get a flat tire. Well, we pulled into the next truck stop, and he got out to check his tires, and he had a flat tire. And so I started thinking, maybe I'm bad luck, so I just stayed there and caught a different ride, and finally got to Hay River, and went to the pool hall there and met a couple of guys that said, knew I was looking, I needed a place to stay because the other guy hadn't gotten back to me yet. And so I stayed with them, and they warned me to watch out for this pickup, because there were forest fires up there in that time too. And they said, if you don't have a job and you're walking around and they want you to fight a fire, they recruit you. And if you say no, they're going to throw you in jail. Now, I don't know if it was true or not, but I did see the pickup, and I'd avoid that all the time. And after a couple of days, I was getting worried about whether my friend had got there or not. I went to the RCMP to see if they could radio up to Fort Simpson to see if anything had happened up there. And about the time they were getting a report back, my friend walked in on me. And I said, we couldn't figure out how he found me. He said, well, the first place he went to was the pool hall, and he ran into Pete, and Pete knew where I was at and stuff like that. So things that worked out. So then we finally got back to Edmonton, and we got back to Brookings. It was about the 1st of August, and I think when we got back, we had about $5 between all 4 of us. So we were broke, but we did get back. The whole trip cost me about $200. That was for food, gas, everything. And again, we were very, very minimalist about it. That's pretty much what I've got to say. There's a kind of a recommendation of a book here called Disappointment River that came out about 6 or 7 years ago about a guy that did canoe the McKenzie River from the start all the way up to the Bering Sea. So our trip, I like to say, was 1,000, but it was probably closer to 900 miles. And it was 4 weeks that we actually spent on the river, and then a couple other weeks getting back to where we needed to be. But the nice thing about this book is that he gets a hold of Alexander Mackenzie's original log himself, and he starts comparing what he's experiencing from what Mackenzie described and stuff too. And I have read some of Mackenzie's original log also, and some of the places that he talks about I recognize. But I want to thank everyone here for allowing me to give this talk. I started getting a lot of memories back after going over my log, and when I told Patrick I volunteered to give a talk like this, I had forgotten a lot of things that were going on. The only regret I have about the trip is that I lost contact with the people that I met, because we were 20, 21 years old. We were quite naive. We really didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, but everything worked out, and part of that was some of the great help we got from people along the way, and I regret not having stayed in contact with some of those people. And so that's what I've got. If you have any questions or have anything you'd like to comment on.
Raj, where'd you get the water? Boil, filter, or where'd you pull off?
We just had cups tied to our canoe. We dipped them in the river and drank it. I know.
Nobody got journey.
No, nobody got jarred. And if we found a lot of the streams and rivers that fed into it were some of them were glacial fed, we'd try and find those and we'd drink that water. But yeah, no, I think back on that. There was one town called Norman Wells, and it, again, an oil company town, and you could see a sheen of oil on the river too. You know, and on one side of the river, it's where a lot of rivers were coming in, it was muddy. On the other side, it was quite clear. We usually stayed on the other clear side, except there's one other story about that too, is that we didn't see any bear, but we pulled into a camping site. You know, there was an abandoned cabin, and we thought those were always nice places to camp, and found a fresh bear trick that I could put both my hands inside of. And we decided, we moved on. But I always wanted to camp on the east side because the grizzly bears were predominantly on the west side, and it was brown bears on the east side until somebody finally said, don't you know that brown bears are just as big, if not bigger, than grizzly bears? So, yeah, but no, that I think about that. No, we didn't get sick. We just dipped our cups in the water and we drank it. Yeah. So, yes.
How did you pick the Mackenzie to start with?
I don't know. It was either the McKinsey or the Yukon, and so why not? Yeah, that's about it. You know, I said we were pretty young, naive. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. I just heard an interview this morning on NPR with a guy called Jules Pfeiffer, and one of the comments he made, he said, "I don't know where I'm going until I get there," and that was kind of us. You know, but that's how we picked it out. And at the time, Inuvik, there is a road that goes there now, so you can get out on the road. But at that time, you got there, you were there, and only a couple of ways out. So, yes.
Was it cold at night? I know you talked about ice in July.
No, it really wasn't. I think we had one night where it maybe got down to 45 or something. We didn't have a thermometer, but I never got chilly in the sleeping bag, and some days I know it was up 90 degrees. It got pretty hot and stuff. I guess one other quick story, is that we got within 200 miles of a total eclipse too. And the thing that we found out is that mosquitoes seem to need sunlight to find you in that total eclipse. And it wasn't total where we were at, but it was definitely darker, and the mosquitoes seemed to be able to find us a little bit better too. But yeah. But no, I think, yeah, it's, well, ironically here too, with these things, I follow temperatures, and I follow the temperatures up in the Inuvik. 4 days ago, when it was 17 below in Brookings, it was 22 above in Inuvik. In Marfa, Texas was at 15 degrees, and there's probably, that would be maybe a 4,000 mile difference. So Inuvik, close to the Arctic Ocean, was warmer than South Texas. But yeah, no, we didn't have any trouble staying warm. So, anything else? Yes.
Roger.
No.
Just on a personal note, I'm Mo Forstein. I live in Sioux Falls, but I met Roger about 3 years after that. And he's a great outdoorsman and a great conservationist and a great friend. So we stayed together for a long time, still see each other after retirement and stuff. But I was amazed because when he told me about his journey, his first journey, up in Brookings at SDSU, go Jacks. Oh, anyway, I was amazed. Here I thought I had seen a lot growing up on the farm by Aberdeen on the Jim River and the Stack Lake Refuge. But Roger told me about his stories and adventures. I really much appreciated that part of life too, because we kind of grew up in the same way. And so
I apologize. I told you I'd be speaking at 1 o'clock. So yeah.
and that's fine. But he had told me. But anyway, as a personal note, he's done an awful lot, and I do appreciate him sharing those things. So thank you.
Oh, yes.
Oh, how accurate were the maps you had? In other words, when you started, you knew that when you got to the end, it was obvious you're there, but how did you know how many miles or how much distance you traveled? And did you have a goal that you wanted to be done by a certain time or not?
Yeah, I'm just gonna pull something out here that I actually brought along some maps here if you want to take a look at them. I pulled about 4 or 5 of them out. I can't remember, we had about 15, 20. They were good maps. Now I've got this fork where the guy bent the tines out and then he would do this to measure the distance on the river. I don't know how accurate that was, but I've always kept that fork. I remember we ended up with that. And our goal, I don't know, 30, 40 miles a day. We didn't really have a goal there either. I know one day, I told you about my miserable day and stuff, and that was probably a shorter day, but there was one day when we were all feeling pretty good and we made, I think, just about 100 miles. We just stopped and rest and eat a little bit and then keep going. But we made about 100 miles one day. We were, concerned about making it to Inuvik at a certain time, but we didn't really know. I mean, yes, we were on the river, it flowed pretty good, and so it's just faith that we'd make it there in time, but we didn't actually have a mileage set. And there were some days that we couldn't travel because the weather was too bad and stuff. So, anybody else? Again, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hello, everybody. My name is Caroline Vermolin, as Pat said. I'm from the Missouri National Recreational River. Here to talk to you guys today about the river itself, what it is as a unit of the National Park Service, and ways that you can get involved, mainly through volunteering. So to introduce myself a little bit more, I am MNRR's Community Volunteer Ambassador, which means that I help manage the volunteer program at the park, and I do community outreach, going to local events, just being a face out there for people to connect and talk to about the river. I do virtual outreach through social media and help to build partnerships, like a partnership with the South Dakota Canoe and Kayak Association, which is why I'm here today. And so basically, we'll kind of go through this and talk about what exactly is the Missouri National Recreational River. You know, we're just a small part of a really long river. We're going to talk about why we're part of the National Park Service, and what it actually means to be a national park and what we do. Then talk about ways that volunteers can support the operations that we have, and why it matters. So, kind of jump right in. The Missouri National Recreational River is 126 miles of river in southeast South Dakota and northeast Nebraska. You might be familiar with this map. If anyone is geographically challenged like myself sometimes, we've got Lewis and Clark Lake in the middle, Yankton to the west of that, and the Missouri National Recreational River is separated into 2 districts. The 39-mile district, which Roger talked about earlier today in his trips down it. The 39 starts at Fort Randall Dam, goes down to running water, but it's not just 39 miles of the Missouri River. It also includes 2 tributaries. We have 20 miles of the lower Niobrara River, as well as Verdigris Creek. And then the 59-mile district was established beforehand in 1978. It was our first part of the river. This may be one that you might be more familiar with, not entirely sure, but this is where we have the majority of our land properties. So we're a park that is a river, but we also have some land, and it's confusing. Our properties, we have 4 of them. We have Green Island, which is near Yankton, near the Discovery Bridge, the Meridian Bridge. It's a great place for camping. We've got Bow Creek Recreation Area, which is accessible by land. You can drive to it. It's on the Nebraska side of the river. There's hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, bird watching, all kinds of good stuff at Bow Creek. Then we've got Goat Island, which might be the most memorable or famous of our properties. It's one of our biggest properties. Again, there's hiking, camping, hunting, fishing, stopping along it as you're paddling down the river. And our last property down the river, that is Mulberry Bend Overlook, which is accessible by land. On the Nebraska side of the river, it's a beautiful scenic overlook place. It's one of my favorite spots because it's covered in wildflowers during the summer. Highly recommend a visit. So that's all the property that's owned by the National Park Service. Everything else along our sections of the Missouri River are either privately owned, it's managed by state parks, Nebraska or South Dakota, or it's city, county parks, or something in between. So it gets kind of confusing of what's in our jurisdiction, what's not, but simple, short, and sweet answer is it's these four properties and then the water itself. And so, as I've been saying, we're a unit of the National Park Service, and when you think about the National Park Service, you might think of kind of the crown jewels of Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Yosemite, all those fancy names that we know, fantastic parks to visit. But there are many other units and sites that are part of the National Park Service, so we are just one of 433 plus units. This includes like national battlefields, historic sites, monuments, memorials, all kinds of other sites that are significant to our country. And as a part of the National Park Service, we are designated in this way through National Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. And so we're one of 228 rivers that are managed and protected through this system, either by National Park Service or other federal agencies. And so I've been saying that we're protected, and it poses the question, why is it protected? And I kind of want to give you guys a pretty picture to think of. Many of you have probably explored and have spent time on the Missouri National Recreation River, and I kind of want to pose the question to you guys. What is different about it? What is kind of special about it when you think about it compared to other sections of the Missouri? Any thoughts?
There's nobody there.
There's nobody there. Yeah.
It is wilderness.
Mhm.
Wild.
Yeah. Any others?
Chalkstone cliffs.
Mm-hmm. The Chalkstone Bluffs. Yeah, exactly. Anything else?
Meanders.
Yep, meanders. Yeah, so there's so many different reasons why these sections of the river are unique. And the fancy kind of cheesy technical legal term is that we have these outstandingly remarkable values. The fact that the Missouri National Recreational River is free flowing. It means that it's unimpounded by dams, unchannelized, and so it's flowing the way that nature intended and the way that the Missouri has historically flowed for thousands of years. And because we have those river dynamics, we have a very kind of ever-changing system, and we've got islands and sandbars and mosaics and so much of it that makes it unique and different from elsewhere on the Missouri. In addition to that, there's a deep cultural connection to the Missouri, not only from the Native American tribes that have been living along it for thousands of years, but also our history with America as Lewis and Clark explored up the Missouri. Steamboats came up it and many of them sank on it. So there's a very deep history and connection to it culturally. Ecologically, like we said, it's a dynamic river system, so we get these really unique habitats. And those habitats lead to fish and wildlife that call it home. The Missouri National Recreational River is home to 700 plus plant species, 400 plus fish and wildlife, and some of those species are not found anywhere else along the Missouri River. Geologically, like we said, there's the Chalkstone Bluffs, there's ancient marine fossils that can be found along the river, and recreationally, this is kind of the shining glory of the MNRR. It's a beautiful place to go and be and not have to be around a ton of people, and you can just appreciate the scenic beauty of it while you're out paddling or boating or fishing or hunting or any other thing that you choose to do along the river. So there's all these outstandingly remarkable values, and the reason why we're part of the National Park Service is that we're trying to protect and preserve these aspects of the river for generations to come. And so as a unit of the Park Service, we are trying to uphold the mission where we're preserving unimpaired the resources of this site for the enjoyment, education, and inspiration of your generation and generations to come. And we're able to do this through the help and support of many of our partners. Because we're a river park, we don't have a whole lot of land. People don't necessarily come to us the way that they would go to a big park like Yellowstone. We have to work with lots of different partners, and we're able to work with a lot of them because they are so collaborative. So a lot of our partners include the Army Corps of Engineers, which manage the dams, Lewis and Clark Lake, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Geological Survey, the state parks of South Dakota and Nebraska, the Native American nations that still live along the river, the Friends of the Missouri National Recreational River, which, quick plug for them, Bob Foley is a member of the board, and they are a fantastic philanthropic partner for us. So I'm sure if you're interested in supporting the river and want to do that through the Friends group, I'm sure Bob would be happy to talk to you about that and give you some more information. But there's so many other partners that help us achieve the work that we do. And that brings me to the next point. What is it that we actually do? What does it mean to be a park ranger? I'm still honestly figuring it out. But for us, we're based out of Yankton, South Dakota. That's where our headquarters is. And with our operations, we have 4 main divisions. There's administration, which literally keeps us afloat, pun kind of intended. With our next division, science and resource management. They're kind of the boots on the ground in the field to monitor wildlife, do trail maintenance, to remove invasive plant species, and so much more. There's such a variety and diversity that it's honestly kind of hard to comprehend everything that they do. My division is interpretation, outreach, and education. We are kind of the public facing side of things, where we might be the faces that you see if you attend a program like an evening ranger talk, or come to a kayak clinic, or you attend a community event along the river. You've heard of a little thing called Riverboat Days. We're there. And lots of other things like guided hikes. We also do outreach through social media. And our last division is definitely not the last but not least, is visitor and resource protection. This is our law enforcement side of things, and they do preventative search and rescue if something does happen, patrols and checking licenses, basically making sure that visitors that are out on the river are staying safe and recreating responsibly so that the resource is protected as well. And so with all of these operations and things that we do, there's ways that the public can support us. And one of the biggest ways that that can happen, and kind of the most active and involved ways, is through volunteering. And when people bring up volunteering, it can kind of be a hit or miss kind of subject, because your time is limited, your time is precious. So it poses a very valuable question, like, why would you choose to volunteer? You know, I kind of want to pose the question to you guys too. You know, what might motivate somebody to volunteer? Nothing?
Sharing your passion for the outdoors.
What was that?
Sharing your passion for the outdoors.
Exactly. Anything else?
A clean river.
Yeah, having a clean river. Yeah, so people are, this river is something that is part of so many people's identity. It's part of their home. They want to keep it clean. They want to protect it. They've built a value of stewardship in themselves, and so they have that value instilled in them. They want to be actively involved in preserving it. Sometimes people just have time. I know that's kind of a foreign concept to a lot of you, or maybe to me, but in that far distant future when I'm retired, I'd like to think that I have the time to volunteer. Other people might just be starting out in their careers. You know, maybe they're a college student or a high school student. They're interested in maybe working for the National Park Service. Volunteering can be a great way to kind of get that first step in and build your resume and get experience. Other folks might just be new to the area and want to get involved, want to be part of a community, make friends, make connections. So there's lots of different reasons why people might volunteer. And also, it can be really fun. Don't these people look like they're having fun? These are all volunteers that we had in the past year. And there's so much that people can gain by volunteering. And of course, there's so much that the park can gain from volunteers. There's so many different ways that volunteers support the parks. Chances are, if you visited a national park site, you've interacted with a volunteer or the work that they've done in some way, whether that's seeing a volunteer being the first face that you see in a visitor center, or you've benefited from the work that a volunteer has done to keep a trail clean or to remove invasive plants. Maybe you've attended a program led by a volunteer, or you've met some of these very interesting guys who fire cannons for fun and muskets. I've gotten to meet several of them. I worked at a Civil War battlefield in the South, and they're very interesting people. Leave it at that. But there's so many different ways that people can volunteer, and so there's something for everybody. And at our park specifically, volunteers are so vital because we do have a limited staff. There's only about 10 people that work in the park, 10 people for 100 plus miles of river and so many different projects that are happening. There's only so much that we can do, and volunteers really help us extend our capacity. But like we said, it also builds stewardship for the people that are volunteering, especially for young people. If you think about it, like an analogy, if you're building a fence, you're really, and you put your blood, sweat, and tears into building that fence, you're really proud of it by the end, and you're really upset if a tree falls on it. And so that's kind of the same thing with a park. If you're getting involved, putting in the time and effort into working towards this mission of conserving these resources in some way, shape, or form, you're more likely to care about it and educate others to care about it. So it's all part of this system where we're teaching the next generation really to care and protect our resources. And two, for us at M&RR, it helps strengthen our identity as a park. More people getting involved helps spread the word about what we do, and how other people can get involved. So that leads me to ways that you can volunteer if you're interested at all. This is kind of separated into long-term opportunities, so on a more regular basis, and then short-term where you don't necessarily have oodles and boodles of time, but you still want to help out. So the one that I'd imagine you guys would be most interested in is kayaking. So our first opportunity is kayak program assistance. This is a program that we started up last summer where volunteers came and helped out with our weekly kayak clinics in Yankton. And so with our kayak clinics, we bring in beginners, teach them how to kayak, and kind of give them a tour of Lake Yankton. And it's a lot of work getting 15 kayaks out and then getting beginners out on the water, kind of like herding cats a little bit. And so having extra help with that is really beneficial. And it's really rewarding seeing beginners like really thrive as they're kayaking and really start to enjoy the activity. The next opportunity would be River Rovers, which is a new opportunity that we're starting this summer. This would be from June to September or October. And River Rovers would be going out onto the river and kind of being a representative and ambassador of the park. So out paddling, interacting with recreators that they see out there, saying hi, encouraging them to wear their life jackets if they aren't, and monitoring conditions, and reporting back to the park so that we can have those reports and kind of firsthand information about what conditions look like out on the river that we can provide to visitors. So this would be throughout the park on the 39 and the 59. Then some other opportunities that we've got, visitor services. So if you're interested, you like talking to people, maybe might not be a thing for an introvert like Roger, but I'm an introvert too, so who knows. So we have a visitor contact station volunteer. This would be in our headquarters in Yankton. Through the summer, we get a lot of visitors coming in wanting to know what they can do, where they should go. They want to become a junior ranger. They want to watch our park film, buy merchandise. And it's really helpful to have extra help when we are kind of slammed with visitors and we don't have a whole lot of folks on staff or when our seasonals are enjoying their weekends. So visitor contact station is another opportunity. That's when visitors come to us. And then visitor outreach is when we go out to the visitors and go out to community events. This would be year round, but most of our events are in the summer. And you could be going out with our mobile ranger station. It's a really fun thing. It's a mobile visitor center on wheels. It's an opportunity for people to learn about the river. Then if you're really into fishing, this could be good for you. We're bringing back our fishing clinics in 2025 and looking for folks to help out with those. So this will be from June to the end of August, primarily in Yankton. And then with natural resources, if you're a fan of hiking, you might want to be a trail steward. So year round, you'd kind of be like adopting a trail and kind of being the designated steward for that. So going out and hiking it periodically to interact with the visitors that you might see out there, monitoring the conditions, picking up any trash that you might see. So this is kind of a more flexible kind of opportunity. And this would be on our properties like Bow Creek and Mulberry Bend. And then another natural resources opportunity could be invasive plant control with our seasonal natural resources staff. From June to September, they're working pretty hard to remove a lot of invasive plants from our properties, and so extra help with that is always appreciated and needed. And then lastly, if you have super cool computer skills or you have experience in clerical work, you can help out our administration staff as an office assistant year round, just a couple of days a month. And that would be in our headquarters in Yankton. And again, if you don't have a ton of time to volunteer, we're always happy to have people help out at our events. So like you guys talked about earlier today, the Missouri River Cleanup is one of our biggest volunteer events. This year it should probably be happening in the first Saturday of May, but don't quote me on that, we're still planning things out. But we also like to have other litter cleanups too when they're necessary, and also invasive plant removal events. And a lot of those do happen on national days of service like Trails Day, Public Lands Day, and Veterans Day. Trails Day is in June, National Public Lands Day is in September. So if you're interested at all in those, the best way to kind of keep up with things is with our social media. So I definitely would encourage you to take a picture of this. Even if you don't want to volunteer, staying up with us on social media is a great way to kind of know about what's happening at the park if we're going to any big events. And if you did have a specific interest in a volunteer position or opportunity, I would highly encourage you to fill out our interest form. This would just be your name, email, and what you're interested in, so that I can reach out to you whenever we're ready to recruit for these specific positions. And so I'll leave that up for a few more seconds in case anyone wants to take a picture of it or scan the QR code. And then the next slide will be my contact information. But I want to reach out and see if anyone has any questions about the park or volunteering before we wrap up. Yes.
So it's two questions. What's the most common question you get asked? What's the weirdest question you've ever been asked? In terms of just volunteers and the events.
Okay, in terms of volunteers and events.
Yeah. Give some context.
It wasn't necessarily at this park, but I got to shadow at a volunteer event at the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, and it was a litter cleanup, and they had to like specifically tell people not to pick up any dead animals, just for safety and everything. It seems like something that would be kind of self-explanatory, but they had to announce that. So that would probably be the weirdest thing that I've seen. Most common question, I think, just at the park in general, is people asking that we're actually part of the National Park Service or confusing us with the Army Corps of Engineers. We have very similar uniforms, and so people get us confused a lot. Or they're more familiar with Lewis and Clark Lake, and so they're not as familiar with the river itself, and so there's that misconception. That's probably the most common question that we get, regardless of volunteer events or just regular day-to-day. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
So, could you, flesh out a little bit? Let's say that I want to explore being a volunteer, so I sign up.
Mm-hmm.
So can you drill down a little bit on the process, the exchange that will go on? Like,
Yeah.
how would I find out what's coming up, and how would you call me or email me, or how would we get together that, oh, I guess I could help with this event?
Mhm.
Can you drill down that process?
Yeah,
a little bit?
absolutely. Thank you for that. That's a good question. So if you, let me go back. If you fill out the interest form, then I have your email. And so when we are ready to recruit for a specific opportunity, I would reach out to you based on what you're interested in, and let you know that it's the opportunity is available to apply for. And with the Park Service, we have to use, I shouldn't say have to, but we use a platform called volunteer.gov. And so all of our volunteer opportunities are advertised on that platform. And so when we're recruiting, if you're wanting to volunteer for that position, you would apply. And then we'd go through the process of looking through your application, making sure that it's the best fit for you, meeting with you to iron out the details of what's involved in this position so that you're aware of what you're signing up for, and we're aware that you're eager and want to do this. And then we'd go through the process of training and get you out into the park as a volunteer. So that's kind of the more intensive side of things with a position. An event is more of you just show up, and even if you are interested in an event, you can still sign up for the interest form, and we'll let you know when events are happening so that you can know if it fits with your schedule. So there's some flexibility there. Does that kind of clear things up, or any other questions with that process? Okay. Any other comments or anything else? No? Well, I appreciate the opportunity so much. Thank you for letting me be here to talk with you and enjoy this beautiful picture of the Missouri National Recreational River and beautiful South Dakota. Alrighty, thank you guys.
And then Pat puts me last, which is pressure. After 3 really good talks today, you want me to finish off the program. Okay, no pressure, not at all. On whitewater, yes, I see lots of whitewater interest. So what do you do to make sure I keep your interest? Lots of videos and carnage. So we're going to do some carnage too. So this is one of my buddies on what's called Dazed Wave. It's not named after me, but I'll take credit for it anyway. But yeah, there's a kayak in there and he's getting a little wet. So we'll run through introduction, background, talk you through section 4, and then do some final thoughts. This was made for a 45-minute slot. We're going to go a little fast. I'll skip through some stuff. But for those that don't do a lot of whitewater, it's funny because our flat water strokes and our whitewater strokes are exactly the same. The forward stroke is the forward stroke. The reverse stroke is the reverse stroke. Just the water you're on changes a little bit. And so the one thing, if I was going out with Pat on Oahe, we would do what you see here. We would do our homework. We'd check the weather. We'd look at the water. It's just a different way to enjoy the waters doing whitewater. Granted, it might be a little fluffier, but a lot of the things that we do in flat water are very similar in what we do in whitewater, especially these kind of simple safety rules that you think about when you do trips. For those that want to know where the Wolf River is, I'm out of Cedar Rapids, so down there in the bottom at A, that's in east central Iowa, and you drive from there all the way up northwest of Green Bay, and is the Wolf River. It is one of the probably premier whitewater rivers in the upper Midwest. Part of it is on the Menominee Tribe Reservation. They have protected it. It is way it looks 200 years ago, other than the first time they came through and logged out. You do need a permit, but there's lots of, the river changes its character depending on how much water. Again, beautiful talk we had today about what's the gauges. Okay, when it's 500 CFS, it's gnarly. When it's down at 150 CFS, it's a lot more fun. So you gotta know what the water is when you're running. So when you start this journey, you go to the put in. This is outer slide. And most of the kayakers and the rafters, we sit around, we get dropped off, you're all ready to go. Make sure all your equipment's there, double check your paddles. Usually we find somebody that says, can I go back to the takeout? I say, why? I left my paddle in the van. Yeah, okay. So we try to make sure everyone's got everything. The first mile of section 4 is flat water. So what do? Well, you take your group picture. All us kayakers, we tend to warm up. And then you got the stand-up boarders, and their warm-ups are completely different than what we do in a kayak. I can't do that in dryland. I don't know how Tracy does it on a board. But that's her warm-up drill. She gets on her board and shows off and makes us all feel that we can't do those kind of things. The first rapid you hit is Sullivan Falls. And the beauty of the Wolf is most of these rapids, number one, you can walk around them. And in whitewater, we have the saying, challenge by choice. So if you don't feel that this is a feature that you can handle, you can walk around. You can see some people in this picture standing up, kind of scouting and looking at the rapid. It is a 7-foot drop, and we've got a couple vids here, but this is Fred in an open canoe, kind of going off that drop. That's me in my kayak, just kind of flying off the edge. But you can also take a raft, and as you can see from the smiles, it's a lot of fun to bounce a raft down Sullivan Falls. When you get the younger crowd, they have this idea, let's just stuff everybody into a boat and see what will happen. You can imagine what happened to the two people in the very back. Yes, they got launched. They learned how to fly when the raft hit the bottom. This is a video of one of the guys in my pod running it. You get to see from the paddler's perspective coming up. And one of the things in whitewater kayaking, we talk about a horizon line. As you paddle up and you notice there seems to be a horizon coming up, that tells you one thing. The river is about to change elevation drastically. So if you don't know where you are, it's time to pull off and go someplace different. This is Glenn coming up. You'll also notice when we get our noses, we call that boofing, to boof over a feature. And there's a shelf here that allows you to naturally boof and catch that air. And that's a lot of fun, especially when you don't know how to boof and the river just allows you to go flying off. And when he spins around back here, you'll see there's the view back on the way up. One of our favorite stories is the tribe will rent to people that want to do this, and they have a very good safety program, and they warn people that you're going out in some major whitewater. But one time, what we assume is a gal and his or her boyfriend came up to the rapid. They were, let's see if my mouse works. Yeah, it does. Right here. You can kind of see there's a shelf before it all falls off the ledge. And they came up, and she's in the front, and he's in the back, and they get right up to the edge, and he steps out of the raft. Raft goes down at Taco. She's inside. She's giggling. She turns around, and he's not in the raft. We heard him for the next half mile. I'm pretty certain they weren't together as a couple after they got off the river. She read him the riot act, which was deservedly so from that. The next rapid down is we call Upper Duck Nest, and James is going to run this. And one of the things you do when you're on these rapids, any rapid, is sometimes you want to slow it down. Things are happening fast. They need to break a river up. And so what the kayakers will do is, this is actually a fun line. You come down here and you catch eddies. And just like in flat water behind islands and things, the slack water, the eddies allow you to regroup and kind of look at things. You can see people over on this opposite shore kind of getting out to scout. James catches, we call this the 3 eddy catch. And he catches that eddy, he's going to come down and catch this one. Eddies allow you to get your breath, they allow you to look at the white water, and they allow you to, when like rafters are coming, you got river traffic. Don't take your eyes off this raft. Just kind of watch this raft, because these are two of the poor souls that probably didn't know how to raft that day. And they hit the wave down at the bottom, and someone gets ejected out of the boat, and luckily there's a big pool down there. But yeah, from a kayaking standpoint, we use these features to help us Now he's setting up. James is going to go across the top of this wave, kind of just ferry himself over, go through that big hole, and then get set up there at the bottom. That's one of our paddlers blasting through the same hole that ate the raft. Of course, if you have an upper duck's nest, you have to have a lower duck nest. And this is at the bottom of lower duck nest looking up. And this is the character of the river. You saw part of it with the drops. The Wolf River has several 5-foot drops in it. This is the rest of it is just continuous water, lots of little holes, lots of waves, lots of things you can hit. And next, I'm going to show you James running lower duck. We'll come down here. It's always fun if you don't get your roll before you get to here, then you get the swim. All of lower duck. So most people try to make sure they're upright before they go through here. But as you watch, he's just going to kind of glide between different things, avoid down here at the big wall. There's a hole you really don't want to be in, so he goes to the right of it. Nice and clean, beautiful, beautiful place to be. Just wonderful water. And what he's going to cut through here is Dave's Wave. And one of the things as kayakers that we love to do is get on a wave like a surfer. And this is one of my buddies working his way. If you get your nose into the wave, it tends to throw water. So there's a boater in there somewhere. And this is a picture or a vid. This is just Glenn. Just like surfers, we get in our kayaks and we can work this water. We can go back and forth. It is an amazing feeling to sit there and match your speed of the water going under you as you're pointed up. And he's just kind of working that wave back and forth. It is so much fun. You can't describe it. And unlike the surf where we got to go back out, you can just stay here and be here. In fact, we gave Glenn several parking tickets on this last trip because he was hogging the wave and wouldn't get off. So the next place down, and it's about a 7-mile run, about halfway, is what we call Picnic Rock. It is the biggest slab of granite I know of outside of El Capitan. This thing goes another half-mile back upstream. It is just an enormous piece of rock. And of course, you can imagine when it's sunny out, it's all solar heated. You've been wet all day. So we usually get out there and I'll fall asleep on the rock, take a nap for a little while. Before you get there, there's a couple features in the river that the folks that know how to do a stern stall, where you bury your tail into the water and go vertical, and they get to play doing that. There's also a rock here right at Picnic that you can do this. James is showing off, and then he messes up. But it's a lot of fun. You can do that. It's called a splat, and you just run up on the rock and slide off and come back down. Once you get past Picnic Rock, and it's really nice because that's a good place for us to break, regroup, have a snack, get some water, repack your bag. Then the jewels come out. These last 3 rapids are the big boys and girls of the rapids. There's the Upper and Lower Dells, and then there's Big Smoky. And as you'll see, we're going to do the Upper Dells. Easy to get up here in this rock and do some scouting. James is going to run down. There is a break between the upper and lower, thank goodness, and you'll see why. The one could call the upper section of the Upper Dells and a lower section of the Upper Dells. But as you come down here, you kind of see a horizon line. You see a whole lot of water, and you're just going to blast your way through. He kind of rides that pool, goes over. He's actually setting safety. He was our lead boater on this trip, waiting for people now to come back down this rapid. We'll go past that one. And then you get to the lower half of the Upper Dells. And there's a wave down here we call Hawaii 5-0. And you'll see it in a minute. It's a big curly wave. And the goal is to get your boat up on that wave and kind of ride it and see if you can hang out on it. Or see if the river says no, it's going to get you. There's the wave. He does a nice job of getting up. And then, of course, there's a couple holes at the end that get to surprise you. You're not ready to see them. So, but that is the lower half of the Upper Dells. Usually at this point, if we've got rookies with us, If that didn't go well, the next isn't going to go well at all. So this is the one place we can kind of test out and see how people are going to go. This is the Lower Dells, and the Lower Dells is just an amazing piece of water. This is the top of it. You can see over here on the right, river left, there are two big holes, and that's typically where the rafts, the commercial rafts, go through. If you've got a big boat, if you're feeling your oats that day, you're going to go challenge the river. Remember, the river always wins. We don't. The river always wins. We just hope to have a happy ending to it. And then over here are some other lines that you can take. What's really cool is that's the bottom. This river has been cutting through here for thousands of years. These are 50, 60-foot walls. You're looking back upstream from inside the canyon. All those rapids are back up here. And that's what's tough. If you have trouble at the entrance to the Lower Dells, you've got a 100-yard swim through a canyon, which there's no way out. You're not going to climb back into your boat. You don't have enough time. And so you get to be a pinball and bounce around in there. So I'm going to give you a couple perspectives. The first one, this is my buddy Glenn running it. He's going to run down. He's actually going to go blast the holes and then have some fun happen. I won't describe the end of it. But you can see that horizon line. You know, trees usually don't start halfway up the trunks. So it's like, okay, something, either the ground sunk or the river went deeper. So we'll go with the river went deeper. But he lines himself up. You notice we're never in a hurry. A lot of people think you blast through a lot of this stuff. Just like in our flat water, we negotiate our way through. He's going to run river left and punch these two holes. And he makes one little mistake there. He lets his tail get into the rapid and he goes down. But you can see that canyon all the way down to the end. Just a beautiful, just an amazing piece of river here that only exists here. Now, I also have I Promise Carnage. So sometimes you want to run the middle line. And there's some boater, that's Piper, running the middle line, and people coming through. At the top of the middle line, you've got to get through a little hole. Well, sometimes it doesn't work. Luckily, almost, nope, I'm falling over. Here, I'll let my buddy help me and hit me. So, going through, and that's the middle line. You can see with anything, you get choices, and with choices come consequences. So, if you don't get through that top hole in the middle line, it doesn't go well. I love running Carnage. We run Carnage a couple times for you. But you'll see at this very top, there's a rather large hole, and they don't get themselves through it very well. And they didn't do their roll very well. Luckily, they kept their head about them and compounding along down in all that foam. Jim kind of runs them over. Not a problem. Another couple vids of just people running, blasting through that top hole in kayaks from this perspective. And we've got safety set down here. They're getting ready to set safety. There's also rafts, and we'll show you one of our rafting crew. They decided to do the middle line. This takes a little bit of skill. Shelley's a very good rafting captain. She runs that down. Make sure she doesn't go sideways over that little drop. And of course, you'll see we've got safety set river right with throw bags, and James throwing kisses to his wife. And if you look down, I'll let this stop here, but you can see the character of this canyon. It is just an amazing piece of water down here. And you can skip this. There is a path on river left. You can take your boats all the way down to the end if you don't want to go through this. And on occasion, we've had our rookies that said, "You're not running this. This isn't your year. We'll let you do it next year." And the last one on our grand tour of the Wolf is Big Smoky Falls. And what's very interesting is you can see here James coming down. It's a 7-foot drop. You've seen the character of the river. It has drops. This is what we call a rock slab or a rock slide. And the water going over this, and you'll get to see a couple of vids here, it's only about 5 inches deep. So when you go to take a stroke, you're not going to get any depth. You're not going to be able to use your stroke for any power. So, and what's beauty, it's about a 45-degree slide. So the river is giving you all the energy and gravity is giving you all the speed. So what's hard for kayakers who've not done this kind of thing is to realize all I've got to do is steer. The river's doing the rest of the work. Let the river do the work. And so we'll show you a video here. It's a little blurry. Piper had some foggy lens, but she's going to come down. We'll run all the way through. You get to see how she really doesn't take strokes. She's more lining herself up, letting the river do things. Again, as you come up, there's a little bit of a horizon line. Once you drop into the run on Big Smoky, other than getting out on the river right side, you're not getting back out of here. And you can see the nature of the rock here. The water is over. Off to the right, that slab is no different than what the water is over the top of. At higher water, this whole thing is covered in quite crazy. We talked earlier about eddies and using eddies to control. Piper gets in here, didn't like her position or speed, pulls over in an eddy, squares herself up, turns around and says, okay, now let's run down and see what happens. The hard part of Big Smoky is this water is flowing right to left. It's piling into the cliff wall. And you'll see what that does is it creates diagonal waves. And those diagonal waves, I want to go this way, but the diagonal wave is trying to turn me. So how do you position your boat? And you can't take a deep stroke. So all this is about managing angles and managing just the direction, how your boat is pointed. So if the river's going to push me around, I deal with it in some way, shape, or form. She stayed wide at that one. Again, you can see those waves coming off that wall. She's trying not to get spun, and then boom, off the end you go, and all kinds of fun. I promise carnage. This is carnage. And luckily Pat keeps his head about him. The boat wasn't bobbing up and down. That's why we wear helmets. He was bouncing off the rocks on the slab. As we all say, are you okay? Because that didn't look like it was any fun from that end, but they're okay. What I'll do is I'll run that again. But you can see what happens. Pat just got over into that wall and then let the river flip him. And at that point, you just kind of hold on and say, well, it's going to hurt. And fall down. A nice, beautiful pool at the end. Safety's there in case he didn't come up. We were ready for him from that end. Now, you've got to be really skilled to do this next thing. So we'll show you. This is my son running his raft with one of his rafting partners. And they have an interesting run. Remember what we talked about on the wall? Rafts don't have as much room to maneuver. He's out of control. It takes talent to be run over by your own raft. So we will show that again just because I like poking fun at Josh. But yeah, he got himself spun around. And unfortunately, his rafting partner took one more reverse stroke rather than let that raft stay teed up to the wave or the drop. And so they got sideways. And Josh is 6'4" and 250. So that's a lot of momentum going off a 6 foot or a 7 foot drop. And he just didn't hold himself into the raft. He was perfectly fine, but see ya. And he gets run over by his own raft, which was the highlight of the trip. So. That's Whitewater. That's some fun. That's one of the premier rivers in Wisconsin. People go there from Memorial Day. Usually it's open Memorial Day to Labor Day. When it gets over about 1,500 cubic feet per second, nobody's out. That gets to be very dangerous. There at Big Smoky, that turns into a terminal hole. It just doesn't let things out. So that's why you look at river gauges. You know, this is not the weekend to be heading up there because it's not going to be open. So hope you had fun with that, and we'll find more carnage and I'll bring it up some other years. Thank you. Got time for questions?
Yeah.
Questions, anybody have anything wild and crazy?
So where would you go to kind of work your way up to that?
So, really good question because I'm an ACA level 4 instructor. So, you start in a pool. You go take a class, whether you're paying instructors or like with the IWC, we do it for free. I've been talking with Dave and Dave. At some point, Iowa Whitewater and South Dakota, we're going to get together and we're going to bring up the instructors and we're going to take a weekend and just do a rolling, paddling, just because the commonality between whitewater and flat water, when you do a draw stroke and you pull your canoe sideways, it's the same stroke in whitewater. Forward stroke is the same. The boats are different, the paddles are different, but the mechanics of the stroke, I dragon boat, I outrigger, I have gills. If it's a boat, I've been in it. The strokes don't change. The boat will change the stroke a little bit, but it's amazing how common our paddle strokes are. So if you want to get into whitewater and you have already paddled a boat, the first couple sessions go fast. You're comfortable with water. You got to get a little more comfortable being upside down in a piece of Tupperware because that's not a normal thing for human beings to have a skirt on and stuck in a boat. But a lot of people say, well, that's crazy. And our answer is we've never found a skeleton stuck in a boat yet. So when you flip a whitewater kayak over, you fall out. And there's techniques. So you learn how to wet exit, you learn how to roll. In fact, we practice, what Pat pointed out, how do you get back into a boat that's already been swamped? And it's a lot harder in our whitewater boats because we don't have that length we have in our recreation boats. But in a pool with an instructor, and most of the time, right now, the Iowa Whitewater Coalition, we have a series of pool sessions. We start in November, we stop in March, but every other week in Cedar Rapids and every other week in Clear Lake. And people are just practicing rolls, practicing strokes, and you use the pool, because once you have a roll, that's half the game. Then you go out on the river, it's noisy, it's dark, there's rocks, so we call that a combat roll. And normally, once you have a good pool roll, then you have to mentally, it's all a mental game. For whatever reason, when I flipped over, like you saw on the last one where Pat was bouncing his head off a rock as he went down the slab, you notice he just stayed tucked. He didn't move. He knew what he was coming up to. He knew where he was going to go. He knew he had a pool, and he knew he had safety. And so he just stayed tucked, waited to the end, and then, okay, now I do my roll. That's all mental. That's all in your head. It's all motor skill. There's no anything to it. So similar to when we're racing flat water and you're going through a wall, you can do it. If you're running waves and stuff out on a bad day, like we heard with the McKenzie, you're there, you got to deal with it. And whitewater is no different. It's just you're in a much more rocky environment, and you just have to add that to your already known skill set. So start with a pool, start with an instructor. YouTube is good, but it doesn't beat having somebody there as put your hand here. Hey, I didn't like where your head was going. I want to change this around from that end. So, and I know there's pool sessions down in Sioux City. Those guys run them. I've been up and helped instruct there. So look and see. Norfolk has a brand new park. I expect that they're going to be doing some work. Norfolk, Nebraska. Yeah. Beautiful park. Beautiful. It's not the Wolf. It's simple class 3s, but that's where you start. And many people, that's where they end. They have no desire to be, you see all the young bucks, let's go over the 25-foot waterfall. Yes, let's break our back. And when we're 50, we'll feel it forever. So, a lot of people, my biggest drop I do is 20 foot. We have a river, there's a 20-foot drop. That's it. If it's 20.1, I don't do it because the chance of the risk versus reward is not there. But start a pool, start with somebody that's there, and have fun. But you'd be amazed. Everybody that paddles flat water, it comes so fast. It comes so natural. You're comfortable on a boat. You know a stroke. You're just learning some different motor skill. And I think my flat water, I know when I did my Missouri trip in 22, I had paddled on the ocean in San Diego. I could see the shoreline. It was several hundred yards to my one side. When I got on Fort Peck, Oh my God. And then I'm watching him do glass. Did I have glass the day I was on Fort Peck? Or the week I was on Fort Peck? No, waves everywhere. And so that was quite I'm glad I had my whitewater skills because I knew what to do with the waves. I knew how to handle that. And so the commonality is crazy. It's so much fun. Other questions?
What was the water temperature? What time of year were you up there?
This
And
is
what was the
Labor
water
Day. This will be year 28 or 29 where we've gone up there on Labor Day. It's the last weekend they're open. Typically it's 75 to 80, pretty hot. You've got a splash top
That's
on.
the air. Okay.
No, the water temp is probably in the high 60s to low 70s. So no dry tops, splash top, no need for gloves.
That's some of the videos I saw, gloves and stuff. So
Yeah, and it just depends on which year we pulled some stuff out. Some people wear gloves because they don't want to beat up their hands.
So I
But
don't-
typically, we have been up there when it's raining, windy, cold, in the 60s, and at that point, you'd see everybody in dry tops, probably not dry suits.
Okay.
I don't paddle when it snows. I don't know why anybody paddles when it snows. I think that's silly. Let the water, all those river seeds will melt, and then we'll boat on them. But yeah, almost always nice and warm, good weather, sunny. Picnic Rock in full sun. You can take a nap out there we all one year let one of the youngsters sleep. We all got in our boats and sat on the shore, and then someone threw a rock and woke him up. He's like, "You're gonna leave me." No, we're not gonna leave you, but we thought we'd scare you. So, other questions? All right, thank you.